Koca Mi'mâr Sinân Âğâ, Ottoman Turkish, Modern Turkish, Mimar Sinan, pronounced, Mimar Sinan, c. 1489–1490, July 17, 1588, was the chief Ottoman architect, Turkish, Mimar, and civil engineer for Sultans Suleiman the Magnificent, Selim II, and Murad III. He was responsible for the construction of more than 300 major structures and other more modest projects, such as his Islamic primary schools, sibyan mektebs. His apprentices would later design the Sultan Ahmed Mosque in Istanbul, Stari Most in Mostar, and help design the Taj Mahal in the Mughal Empire. The son of a stonemason, he received a technical education and became a military engineer. He rose rapidly through the ranks to become first an officer and finally a Janissary commander, with the honorific title of Âghâ. He refined his architectural and engineering skills while on campaign with the Janissaries, becoming expert at constructing fortifications of all kinds, as well as military infrastructure projects, such as roads, bridges and aqueducts.At about the age of 50, he was appointed as chief royal architect, applying the technical skills he had acquired in the army to the creation of fine religious buildings and civic structures of all kinds. He remained in post for almost 50 years. His masterpiece is the Selimiye Mosque in Edirne. Although his most famous work is the Suleiman Mosque in Istanbul, he headed an extensive governmental department and trained many assistants who, in turn, distinguished themselves, including Sedef Kememdega, architect of the Sultan Ahmed Mosque. He is considered the greatest architect of the classical period of Ottoman architecture, and has been compared to Michelangelo, his contemporary in the West. Michelangelo and his plans for St. Peter's Basilica in Rome were well known in Istanbul, since Leonardo da Vinci and he had been invited, in 1502 and 1505 respectively, by the Sublime Porte to submit plans for a bridge spanning the Golden Horn. According to contemporary biographer, Mustafa Celabi, Sinan was born in 1489, c. 1490 according to the Encyclopaedia Britannica, 1491 according to the Dictionary of Islamic Architecture, and sometime between 1494 and 1499, according to the Turkish professor and architect Trihagane, with the name Joseph. He was born either an Armenian, Albanian, Greek or a Turkish in a small town called Agnes near the city of Kayseri in Anatolia, as stated in an order by Sultan Selim II. One argument that lends credence to his Armenian background is a decree by Selim II dated Ramadan 7 981, Ca. December 30, 1573, which grants Sinan's request to forgive and spare his relatives from the general exile of Kayseri's Armenian community to the island of Cyprus. According to Herbert J. Muller, he seems to have been an Armenian, though it is almost a criminal offense in Turkey today to mention this probability. Lucy Dermanulian of the Tufts University suggests that he can be identified as an Armenian through a document in the Imperial Archives and other evidence. Several scholars have cited Sinan's possible Albanian origin, while according to the British scholar Percy Brown in The Indian's Mahajan, the Mughal Emperor Babur was very dissatisfied from the local Indian architecture and planning. Thus he invited certain pupils of the leading Ottoman architect Sinan, the Albanian genius, to carry out his architectural schemes. The scholars who support the thesis of his Greek background have identified his father as a stonemason and carpenter by the name of Christos, Greek, a common Greek name. It is certain that both his parents were of the Eastern Orthodox Christian faith, since the Ottoman archives of that epoch recorded only religion information about the population. The concept of ethnicity was irrelevant to the religion-based Ottoman millet system. Sinan, Joseph, grew up helping his father in his work, and by the time that he was conscripted would have had a good grounding in the practicalities of building work. There are 3 brief records in the library of the Topkapı Palace, dictated by Sinan to his friend Mustafa Celabi. Anonymous text, Architectural Masterpieces, Book of Architecture. In these manuscripts, Sinan divulges some details of his youth and military career. His father is mentioned as Abdülmenan. Military career. In 1512, Sinan was conscripted into Ottoman service under the Defşirme system. 222. and was sent to Constantinople to be trained as an officer of the Janissary Corps and converted to Islam. He was too old to be admitted to the Imperial Indoor School in the Topkapı Palace but was sent instead to an auxiliary school. 22. Some records claim that he might have served the Grand Vizier Pagal Ibrahim Pasha as a novice of the Ibrahim Pasha school. Possibly, he was given the Islamic name Sinan there. He initially learned carpentry and mathematics, but through his intellectual qualities and ambitions, he soon assisted the leading architects and got his training as an architect. During the next 6 years, he also trained to be a Janissary officer, Asamiyaglan. He possibly joined Selim II in his last military campaign, Rhodes according to some sources, but when the Sultan died, this project ended. 2 years later he witnessed the conquest of Belgrade under the new Sultan, Suleiman the Magnificent. He was present, as a member of the household cavalry, at the Battle of Mohacs. He was promoted to captain of the Royal Guard and then given command of the Infantry Cadet Corps. He was later stationed in Austria, where he commanded the 62nd Order of the Rifle Corps. He became a master of archery, while at the same time, as an architect, learning the weak points or structures when gunning them down. In 1535 he participated in the Baghdad campaign as a commanding officer of the Royal Guard. In 1537 he went on expeditions to Corfu and Apulia and Moldavia. During these campaigns he proved himself an able architect and engineer. When the Ottoman army captured Cairo, Sinan was promoted to chief architect and was given the privilege of tearing down any buildings in the captured city that were not according to the city plan. Citation needed. During the campaign in the East, he assisted in the building of defenses and bridges, such as a bridge across the Danube. He converted churches into mosques. During the Persian campaign in 1535 he built ships for the army and the artillery to cross Lake Van. For this he was given the title Harski, Sergeant-at-Arms in the bodyguard of the Sultan, a rank equivalent to that of the Janissary Âğâ. When Çelebi Lutfi Pasha became Grand Vizier in 1539, he appointed Sinan, who had previously served under his command, to the office of architect of the Abode of Felicity. This was the start of a remarkable career. The job entailed the supervision infrastructure construction and the flow of supplies within the Ottoman Empire. He was also responsible for the design and construction of public works, such as roads, waterworks and bridges. Through the years he transformed his office into that of architect of the empire, an elaborate government department, with greater powers than his supervising minister. He became the head of a whole corps of architects, training a team of assistants, deputies and pupils. His training as an army engineer gave Sinan an empirical approach to architecture rather than a theoretical one. But the same can be said of the great Western Renaissance architects, such as Brunelleschi and Michelangelo. Various sources state that Sinan was the architect of around 360 structures which included 84 mosques, 51 small mosques, mesjid, 57 schools of theology, medres, 7 schools for Quran reciters, Darul Qur'an, 22 mausoleums, turbi, 17 almhouses, imarat, 3 hospitals, darasifa, 7 aqueducts and arches, 48 inns, caravansary, 35 palaces and mansions, 8 vaults and 46 baths. Sinan held the position of chief architect of the palace, which meant being the overseer of all construction work of the Ottoman Empire, for nearly 50 years, working with a large team of assistants consisting of architects and master builders. The development and maturing stages of Sinan's career can be illustrated by 3 major works. The first 2 of these are in Istanbul: the Stari Mosque, which he calls a work of his apprenticeship period, and the Suleiman Mosque, which is the work of his qualification stage. The Selim II Mosque in Edirne is the product of his master stage. Stari Mosque is the first of the grand mosques created by Sinan. The Mimar Sultan Mosque, which is also known as the Koca Mosque, was completed in the same year and has an original design with its main dome supported by 3 half-domes. When Sinan reached the age of 70, he had completed the Suleiman Mosque complex. This building, situated on one of the hills of Istanbul facing the Golden Horn, and built in the name of Suleiman the Magnificent, is one of the symbolic monuments of the period. The diameter of the dome, which exceeds the 31 meters, 102 feet, of the Selim Mosque which Sinan completed when he was 80, is the most outstanding example of the level of achievement reached by Sinan. Mimar Sinan reached his artistic peak with the design, architecture, tile decorations and landstone workmanship displayed at Selim II. Another area of architecture where Sinan produced unique designs are his mausoleums. The mausoleum of Sayyid Mehmed is notable for with its exterior decorations and slice dome clarification needed. The Rustam Paşa mausoleum is a very attractive structure in classical style. The mausoleum of Suleiman the Magnificent is an interesting experiment, with an octagonal body and flat dome. The Selim II mausoleum has a square plan and is one of the best examples of Turkish mausoleum architecture. Sinan's own mausoleum, which is located in the northeast part of the Suleiman I complex on the other hand, is a very plain structure. Sinan masterfully combined art with functionalism in the bridges he built. The largest of these is the nearly 635 meters, 2,083 feet, long Büyükçekmece Bridge. Other important examples are the Alivri Bridge, the Old Bridge in Sfiling on the Maritsa, the Lüleburgaz, Sokalu Mehmet Pasha, Bridge on the Lüleburgaz River, the Sinanlı Bridge over the River Ergin and the Drina Bridge. While Sinan was maintaining and improving the water supply system of Istanbul, he built arched aqueducts at several locations within the city. The Maglava Arch over the Alibi River, which is 257 meters, 843 feet, long and 35 meters, 115 feet 35 meters high, has 2 tiers of arches, and is one of the best examples of its kind. At the start of Sinan's career, Ottoman architecture was highly pragmatic. Buildings were repetitions of former types and were based on rudimentary plans. They were more an assembly of parts than a conception of a whole. An architect could sketch a plan for a new building and an assistant or foreman knew what to do, because novel ideas were avoided. Moreover, architects used an extravagant margin of safety in their designs, resulting in a wasteful use of material and labor. Sinan would gradually change all this. He was to transform established architectural practices, amplifying and transforming the traditions by adding innovations, trying to approach perfection. During these years he continued the traditional pattern of Ottoman architecture, but he gradually began exploring other possibilities, because during his military career he had the opportunity to study the architectural monuments in the conquered cities of Europe and the Middle East. His first opportunity to design a major building was the Huzrev Pasha Mosque and its double medrese in Aleppo, Syria. It was built in the winter of 1536 to 1537 for his commander-in-chief and the governor of Aleppo between 2 army campaigns. It was built hastily and this is evident in the coarseness of execution and the crude decoration. His first major commission as the royal architect was the construction of a modest Husky harem complex for Roxlana, Hürrem Sultan, the wife of the Sultan, Suleiman the Magnificent. He had to follow the plans drawn by his predecessors. Sinan retained the traditional arrangement of the available space without any innovations. Nevertheless, it was already better built than the Aleppo Mosque and it shows a certain elegance. However, it has suffered from many restorations. Sinan is credited to have built a defensive tower in Vlor, South Albania, in 1537, very similar to the White Tower of Thessaloniki, as well as Murad Mosque, during Suleiman the Magnificent's stay in the town for the preparation of his expedition towards Italy. In 1541, he started the construction of the Mausoleum, Turbi, of the Grand Admiral Hayreddin Barbarossa. It stands on the shore of Besiktas on the European part of Istanbul, at the site where his fleet used to assemble. Oddly enough, the admiral is not buried there, but in his turbi next to the Iskele Mosque. This mausoleum has been severely neglected since then. Mehmet Sultana, the only daughter of Suleiman and wife of the Grand Vizier Rustam Pasha, gave Sinan the commission to build a mosque with medrese, college, an imarat, soup kitchen, and a sibyan mekteb, Quran school, in Üsküdar. The imarat no longer exists. This Iskele Mosque, or Jetty Mosque, already shows several hallmarks of Sinan's mature style: a spacious, high-vaulted basement, slender minarets, single-domed baldacchino, flanked by 3 semi-domes ending in 3 ixadrae and a broad double portico. The construction was finished in 1548. The construction of a double portico was not a first in Ottoman architecture, but it set a trend for country mosques and mosques of viziers in particular. Rustam Pasha and Mehran acquired them later in their 3 mosques in Constantinople and in the Rustam Pasha Mosque in Tekirdağ. The inner portico traditionally have stalactite capitals while the outer portico has capitals with chevron patterns. Baklava. When Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent returned from another Balkan campaign, he received news that his heir to the throne Seyyid Mehmet had died at the age of 22. In November 1543, not long after Sinan had started the construction of the Iskele Mosque, the Sultan ordered Sinan to build a new major mosque with an adjoining complex in memory of his favorite son. This Seyyid Mosque would become larger and more ambitious than his previous ones. Architectural historians consider this mosque as Sinan's first masterpiece. Obsessed by the concept of a large central dome, Sinan turned to the plans of mosques such as the Fatih Pasha Mosque in Diyarbakır or the Piri Pasha Mosque in Harskoy. He must have visited both mosques during his Persian campaign. Sinan built a mosque with a central dome, this time with 4 equal half-domes. This superstructure is supported by 4 massive, but still elegant, freestanding octagonal fluted piers and 4 piers incorporated in each lateral wall. In the corners, above roof level, 4 turrets serve as stabilizing anchors. This coherent concept already is markedly different from the additive plans of traditional Ottoman architecture. Sedef Komendegah would later copy the concept of fluted piers in his Sultan Ahmed Mosque in an attempt to lighten their appearance. Sinan, however, rejected this solution in his next mosques, mid-1550s to 1570s, qualification stage. By 1550, Suleiman the Magnificent was at the height of his powers. Having built a mosque for his son, he felt it was time to construct his own imperial mosque, an enduring monument larger than all the others, to be built on a gently sloping hillside dominating the Golden Horn. Money was no problem, since he had accumulated a treasure from the loot of his campaigns in Europe and the Middle East. He gave the order to Sinan to build a mosque, the Suleiman II, surrounded by a qal'a consisting of 4 colleges, a soup kitchen, a hospital, an asylum, a hammam, a caravanserai and a hospice for travelers. Taban. Sinan, now heading a formidable department with a great number of assistants, finished this formidable task in 7 years. Before Suleiman II, no mosques had been built with half-cubic roofs. He got the idea of half-cubic roof design from the Hagia Sophia. Through this monumental achievement, Sinan emerged from the anonymity of his predecessors. Sinan must have known the ideas of the Renaissance architect Leone Battista Alberti, who in turn had studied de architecture by the Roman architect and engineer Vitruvius, since he too was concerned in building the ideal church, reflecting harmony through the perfection of geometry in architecture. But, contrary to his Western counterparts, Sinan was more interested in simplification than in enrichment. He tried to achieve the largest volume under a single central dome. The dome is based on the circle, the perfect geometrical figure representing, in an abstract way, a perfect God. Sinan used subtle geometric relationships, using multiples of 2 when calculating the ratios and the proportions of his buildings. However, in a later stage, he also used divisions of 3 or ratios of 2 to 3 when working out the width and the proportions of domes, such as the Sokolu Mehmet Pasha Mosque at Kadga. While he was fully occupied with the construction of the Suleiman II, Sinan or his subordinates drew up the plans and gave instructions for many other constructions. Sinan built a mosque for the Grand Vizier Pagal Ibrahim Pasha and a mausoleum, Turbi, at Silivriköp, Constantinople, in 1551. The next Grand Vizier, Rustam Pasha, gave Sinan several more commissions. In 1550 he built a large inn, Han, in the Galata district of Istanbul. About 10 years later he built another Han in Edirne, and between 1544 and 1561 the Taj Han at Erzurum. He designed a caravanserai in Italy and an octagonal madrasa in Constantinople. Between 1553 and 1555, Sinan built the Sinan Pasha Mosque at Besiktas, a smaller version of the Us-Serafli Mosque at Edirne, for the Grand Admiral Sinan Pasha. This proves again that Sinan had thoroughly studied the work of other architects, especially since he was responsible for the upkeep of these buildings. He copied the old form, pondered over the weaknesses in the construction and tried to solve this with his own solution. In 1554, Sinan used the form of the Sinan Pasha Mosque again for the construction of the mosque for the next Grand Vizier Kara Ahmet Pasha in Constantinople, his first hexagonal mosque. By using a hexagonal plan, Sinan could reduce the side domes to half domes and set them in the corners at an angle of 45 degrees. Clearly, Sinan must have appreciated this form, since he repeated it later in mosques such as the Sokolu Mehmed Pasha Mosque at Kadga and the Atik Valide Mosque at Üsküdar. In 1556, Sinan built the Haski Haram Hammam, replacing the antique baths of Zeuxippus, which are still standing close to the Hagia Sophia. This would become one of the most beautiful hammams he ever constructed. In 1559, he built the Kafaraga Madrasa below the forecourt of the Hagia Sophia. In the same year he began the construction of a small mosque for Iskender Pasha at Kanka, beside the Bosphorus. This was one of the many minor and routine commissions the office of Sinan received over the years. In 1561, when Rustam Pasha died, Sinan began the construction of the Rustam Pasha Mosque, as a memorial supervised by his widow Mihrimah Sultana. It is situated just below the Suleiman II. This time the central form is octagonal, modeled on the monastery church of Saints Sergius and Bacchus, with 4 small semi-domes set in the corners. In the same year, Sinan built a toby for Rustam Pasha in the garden of the Sayzade Mosque, decorated with the finest tiles Iznik could produce. Mihrimah Sultana, having doubled her wealth after the death of her husband, now wanted a mosque of her own. Sinan built the Mihrimah Camii at Edirne Gate, for her on the highest of the 7 hills of Constantinople. He raised the mosque on a vaulted platform, accentuating its hilltop site. There is some speculation concerning the dates. Until recently this was supposed to be between 1540 and 1540, but now it is generally accepted to be between 1562 and 1565. Sinan, concerned with grandeur, built a mosque in one of his most imaginative designs, using new support systems and lateral spaces to increase the area available for windows. He built a central dome 37 meters, 121 feet, high and 20 meters, 66 feet, wide, supported by pendentives, on a square base with 2 lateral galleries, each with 3 cupolas. At each corner of this square stands a gigantic pier, connected with immense arches each with 15 large windows and 4 circular ones, flooding the interior with light. The style of this revolutionary building was as close to the Gothic style as Ottoman structure permits. Between 1560 and 1566 Sinan built a mosque in Constantinople for Zal Mahmud Pasha on a hillside beyond Avansarayh. Sinan certainly conceived the plans and partly supervised the construction, but left the building of lesser areas to less than competent hands, since Sinan and his most able assistants were about to begin his masterpiece, the Selim II Mosque in Edirne. On the outside, the mosque rises high, with its east wall pierced by 4 tiers of windows. This gives the mosque an aspect of a palace or even a block of apartments. Inside, there are 3 broad galleries making the interior look compact. The heaviness of this structure makes the dome look unexpectedly lofty. These galleries look like a preliminary tryout for the galleries of the Selim II Mosque. In this late stage of his life, Sinan tried to create unified and sublimely elegant interiors. To achieve this, he eliminated all the unnecessary subsidiary spaces beyond the supporting piers of the central dome. This can be seen in the Sokolu Mehmet Pasha Mosque in Istanbul, 1571 to 1572, and in the Selim II Mosque in Edirne. In other buildings of his final period, Sinan experimented with spatial and the mural treatments that were new in the classical Ottoman architecture. According to him from his autobiography Tezkiratul Bunyan, his masterpiece is the Selim II Mosque in Edirne. Breaking free of the handicaps of traditional Ottoman architecture, this mosque marks the climax of Sinan's work and of all classical Ottoman architecture. While it was being built, The architect's saying of "you can never build a dome larger than the dome of Hagia Sophia, and especially as Muslims," was his main motivation. When it was completed, Sinan claimed that it had the largest dome in the world, leaving Hagia Sophia behind. In fact, the dome height from the ground level was lower and the diameter barely larger, 0.5 meters, approximately 2 feet, than the millennium-older Hagia Sophia. However, measured from its base, the dome of Selim II is higher. Sinan was more than 80 years old when the building was finished. In this mosque he finally realized his aim of creating the optimum, completely unified, domed interior, a triumph of space that dominates the interior. He used this time an octagonal central dome, 31.28 meters wide and 42 meters high, supported by 8 elephantine piers of marble and granite. These supports lack any capitals but have squinches or consoles at their summit, leading to the optical effect that the arches seem to grow integrally out of the piers. By placing the lateral galleries far away, he increased the three-dimensional effect. The many windows in the screen walls flood the interior with light. The buttressing semi-domes are set in the 4 corners of the square under the dome. The weight and the internal tensions are hidden, producing an airy and elegant effect rarely seen under a central dome. The 4 minarets, 83 meters high, at the corners of the prayer hall are the tallest in the Muslim world, accentuating the vertical posture of this mosque that already dominates the city. He also designed the Taqiyya al-Sulaymaniya Khan and Mosque in Damascus, still considered one of the city's most notable monuments, as well as the Banya Bashi Mosque in Sofia, Bulgaria, currently the only functioning mosque in the city. He has also built Mehmet Paša Sokolović Bridge in Visegrad across the Drina River in the east of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is now UNESCO World Heritage Site. At the start of his career as an architect, Sinan had to deal with an established, traditional domed architecture. His training as an army engineer led him to approach architecture from an empirical point of view, rather than from a theoretical one. He started to experiment with the design and engineering of single-domed and multiple-domed structures. He tried to obtain a new geometrical purity, a rationality and a spatial integrity in his structures and designs of mosques. Through all this, he demonstrated his creativity and his wish to create a clear, unified space. He started to develop a series of variations on the domes, surrounding them in different ways with semi-domes, piers, screen walls and different sets of galleries. His domes and arches are curved, but he avoided curvilinear elements in the rest of his design, transforming the circle of a dome into a rectangular, hexagonal or octagonal system. He tried to obtain a rational harmony between the exterior pyramidal composition of semi-domes, culminating in a single drumless dome, and the interior space where this central dome vertically integrates the space into a unified whole. His genius lies in the organization of this space and in the resolution of the tensions created by the design. He was an innovator in the use of decoration and motifs, merging them into the architectural forms as a whole. He accentuated the center underneath the central dome by flooding it with light from the many windows. He incorporated his mosques in an efficient way into a complex, Kulli, serving the needs of the community as an intellectual center, a community center, and serving the social needs and the health problems of the faithful. When Sinan died, classical Ottoman architecture had reached its climax. No successor was gifted enough to better the design of the Selim II Mosque and to develop it further. His students retreated to earlier models, such as the Stari Mosque. Invention faded away, and a decline set in. During his tenure during 50 years of the post of imperial architect, Sinan is said to have constructed or supervised 476 buildings, 196 of which still survive, according to the official list of his works, the Tazkirat al-Abniya. He couldn't possibly have designed them all, but he relied on the skills of his office. He took credit and the responsibility for their work. 4. As a Janissary, and thus a slave of the Sultan, his primary responsibility was to the Sultan. In his spare time, he also designed buildings for the chief officials. He delegated to his assistants the construction of less important buildings in the provinces. He died in 1588 and is buried in a tomb in Istanbul, a turbi of his own design, in the cemetery just outside the walls of the Suleiman Mosque to the north. across a street named Mimar Sinan Âğâ in his honor. He was buried near the tombs of his greatest patrons, Sultan Suleiman and the Sultanah Hürrem, Suleiman's wife. His name is also given to a crater on the planet Mercury. A Turkish state university, the Mimar Sinan University of Fine Arts in Istanbul. Sinan's portrait was depicted on the reverse of the Turkish 10,000 lira banknotes of 1982 to 1995.